Rwanda.
I thank the representative of Rwanda, and I now give the floor to the representative of Djibouti.
President, at the outset, Djibouti wishes to express its gratitude to the delegation of the Arab Republic of Egypt for taking the leadership in organizing this important debate of the Security Council on the theme United Nations, African Union Peace and Security Cooperation, Chapter 8, Application and the Future of the African Peace and Security Architecture. We further wish to thank you for the concept note drafted in preparation for this meeting, in that it helps frame the issues and sharpen our focus on the key achievements as well as serious deficiencies that need to be remedied. We would also like to express our appreciation for the very useful briefings provided to us this morning at this meeting. Djibouti aligns itself with the statement by the non-aligned movement. Mr. President, Chapter 8 records an international consensus regarding global regional relationship. The United Nations support for managing conflict on the continent has ever been more robust over the past 25 years, rising from 2 UN-led peacekeeping operations in 1990 to 15 in 2015. These missions represent a majority of United Nations peacekeeping missions globally, and serve as a big proving ground for UN engagement in managing conflict. What has started largely as an improvisation, to borrow the words of a former UN official, has tremendously evolved, and in this journey, the African Union Peace and Security Council has proved to be a reliable partner. As rightly pointed out in the concept paper and echoed by many in the room today, the changing nature of conflict on the continent and the operational questions it raises pose an additional layer of complexity to the cohesiveness of the global chains that has seriously been often tested in the past. How do we engage with non-state actors that do not respect humanitarian law? How do we deal with the rise of illegal activities and violent insurgencies? How do we ensure that the peacekeeping institutions, the REX, the AU, and the UN, indeed consider the relationship as partnership rather than compete over who goes first and who leads in which process? Drawing on lessons learned and building on the pertinent views by many stakeholders and the outcome of this open debate, we should identify concrete means to further strengthen an integrative worldwide system of cooperative action as envisioned in the United Nations Chapter 8. Monsieur le Président, en 2000...
Mr. President, in 2015, the high-level panel believed it was important to improve cooperation between the United Nations and regional organizations and sub-regional organizations, especially through recommendations geared to building capacity and preventing conflict, and through mediation. It also recommended to focus on the primacy of political solutions as well as joint activities and cooperation in order to have a broad scope of partners to make it possible to detect potential crises well upstream. Mr. President, the upcoming signature of the 10-year framework for strategic partnership in peace and security between the United Nations and the African Union, as well as the Agenda 2063, silencing weapons for an Africa free of weapons by 2020, combined with consultations, annual joint consultations since 2007 between the Security Council and the Peace and Security Council of the AU, all will provide first-rate institutional plans for cooperation between the two entities. We note with satisfaction the implementation of the cooperation framework between the UN and the creation of a number of liaison offices with regional organizations between the UN and the AU and sub-regional, ECOWAS, etc. And recently, the signature of the partnership framework between IGAD and the UN, which took place in Djibouti in November of 2015. Due to these various mechanisms, the level of inter-organizational cooperation should be an additional resource that we can exploit. Indeed, these tools will no doubt lead to the development of common strategies due to joint assessments, mechanisms for making sound decisions based on consultation and sharing of information, and follow-up in order to cooperate in the area of planning and implementation. Mr. President, the deployment of the Blue Helmets, made up of 50% Africans in several peacekeeping operations in different regions of the continent, clearly shows the commitment of African member states, the Organization of the African Union, and regional components and its member states to contribute, working together with the United Nations to collective security as set forth in the United Nations Charter. These examples of cooperation between the organization are multiple and multiform: the hybrid mission in Darfur, Central Africa, Mali, and so forth. Although the work in Mali is still quite fragile due to the work that remains to be done in the humanitarian region. In order to provide logistical support to AMISOM and in the context of implementation of and providing good conditions for its mandate, the United Nations have put in place the United Nations Office of Assistance in Somalia in order to build operational capacity and financial capacity, which is rather limited in AMISOM. However, Mr. President, despite this support, the absence of multiplying forces such as helicopters does not make the task for the African Union any easier on the ground. And to that, we should add the upcoming reduction by 20% of financial support by the European Union, which will impact the mission harshly and which might make them take a serious step backwards in accomplishing their mission, and there's much to do. Mr. President, it's urgent to find a proper ground for more synergies, a harmonious partnership between the UN and the AU in the area of prevention and mediation, and to manage violent conflict in order to provide more advantages and leverage mobilization of resources. In this regard, greater flexibility and interpretation of Chapter 8 of the Charter would make it possible to significantly reduce the gaps in the area of the conduct of relative action to peace and security internationally. Mr. President, the African Concentrate has 70% of the current crises in the world, and the Security Council of the United Nations devotes 2/3 of its deliberations to the continent. It's therefore key for the security of the continent and for peace and security internationally, for long-term solutions to be found, and to have ongoing and regular collective reflection between the two organizations. Thank you.
أشكر ممثل
I thank the representative of Djibouti and